Hello and Happy New Year. We're going to be recording another chess video, so let's get it started. We're going to be playing 15-10 time control as we do normally. Alright, let's see. We're playing as black and our opponent starts with e4. So we're going to respond with a Sicilian. And he's going for knight f3 here, which it initiates the open Sicilian, or it can be a pathway to initiate the open Sicilian. And now he's playing bishop c4. So we responded with d6, and bishop c4, it can transpose into some variations of maybe like what I play, but the response to this is e6, immediately blunting the diagonal of the bishop. What this is it's kind of a Bowdler attack type game. And e6, it's considered not like a very theoretical move. It's kind of weakening to immediately go bishop c4, because you can immediately play e6 and it commits the bishop to kind of a weaker diagonal here. Usually you want to break open the center before with d4 before you commit the bishop out here. Let's play knight f6 here. He castled. And then my plan here is just normal developing moves. Now he plays e5, which I'm not really scared of. We can just take here, and he can take back with a knight. Now the annoying thing about this position, or what may seem annoying, is that his knight is on e5. It's his most advanced piece, and generally when a piece is in your like your side of the board, so that would be for black the 5th rank and beyond, you want to get rid of that piece if you have time to, let's say. So you could do that either with knight c6 or knight d7, kicking away the knight. The problem with knight c6 is maybe he could pin the knight and then force like a pawn weakening, like a weakening pawn capture that weakens our pawn structure. So I'm going to play knight d7 here, go for knight d7. And if he captures, we've successfully removed the knight, and we can develop a piece in the process with bishop takes back here. And that will basically foil any plans he would have to pin. And now he's going for kind of an Alapin-like move, c3. It might be setting up, d4, so he can have more control of the center here. Let's see how we want to respond to that. We could go a6 as kind of a more Sicilian move, but really b5 doesn't even need to be set up with a6 if we look here, because the bishop is already guarding this spot, and that could maybe allow us to play c4 to kind of discourage this idea of d4. We could also just develop our bishop and castle, would be kind of a safer way to play this, but as Sicilian players, I think we gotta be kind of aggressive here with queenside expansion especially. So we're going to play b5. His bishop will probably drop back, and then maybe we could play c4 here, kind of discouraging the push of d4, because we can take it with en passant, and he won't be able to, replace it in the center with his own pawn. So we'll go c4. Kind of locking. I mean, his bishop is now eyeing our kings. That's something we got to keep in mind. And the other consequence of our little pawn pushes here we had on the queen side is that now we have like a good diagonal for our dark squared bishop to be on. So that's another reason I kind of like this whole move. And for now, I mean, his knight is restricted until I think he should still push d4 until he can make that push. So let's develop our bishop here to this powerful diagonal. And d4 doesn't really come with tempo because we wanted to take this anyway. b3 is kind of a way to try to, I mean, he's trying to take, make like d4 more possible, I guess, but really he's just, this pawn is just going to get replaced with the b5 pawn, so I don't think it really requires any reinforcement there. So we'll castle. And we got to be careful a little bit of these pieces eyeing towards our king, but really has no attack started yet. So we can kind of see what his plan is here. Okay. He plays b4, which kind of closes the queen side here, which I think benefits black because one, he just used 2 moves with the same pawn here, and 2, look at how his pieces on this side are like struggling to get developed. I mean, he secured a square for his knight maybe, but this pawn can basically just protect there, and now where is he going with his knight? He can't go back here because his own piece is there, and he's a little bit struggling to get his piece developed. We want to keep this bishop on this diagonal here. I'm going to drop it back to b6 there. And he plays d3, which is a little bit more passive. And I think it's all right to take this. I think it's all right to take. We could even not take and play bishop to c6, but then I don't like the prospect of him pushing d4 and freeing up his pieces there. So let me think a little bit. Is there anything better, any better options we have here? Takes, and then if we're trying to play bishop c6, he can maybe play c5. Let's see. Yeah, let's take. I don't know if we need to play bishop c6 either. We don't have to get hyper focused, I guess, on that idea. Let's see. Now we got bishop takes. Now I think is a time where we want to start finding weaknesses in his position and attacking them. So let's say the weaknesses in his position are he hasn't developed any of his queenside pieces, and also he has a backward pawn here. He doesn't have any threats yet because he can't take this pawn because it's defended. I think we should consider queen c7, discouraging the development of this knight. I mean, he could still develop his bishop here, but maybe rook to c8 would be a decent move. I always had in mind bishop c6, kind of slightly getting this bishop to a better diagonal here, but I like rook c8 or queen c7 because it also discourages the prospect of him pushing c5 and ever getting rid of this weakness here. It also discourages immediate development of the knight. So maybe rook c8 would be slightly safer here. I mean, queen c7 would also connect our rooks. Let's play queen c7. It's kind of a very Sicilian move. You'll see it in a lot of different Sicilian positions, I guess. All right, bishop to to D3 to E3. My bad. He's proposing a trade of bishops here, which I think we could maybe take, and that wouldn't be terrible. And then we could maybe move a rook to D8, replace our. Yeah, I think we definitely. I don't think we want him to take and force our queen to move there. And now he has another isolated pawn here. Let's see. How do we want to attack this? I like rook d8, you know, setting up just an x-ray on the queen eventually. And I mean, these pawns can both be targeted by our knight eventually, maybe. Let's play rook f to d8. And I think we're in pretty good shape here. Wow, okay, rook takes f6. I don't see where this sacrifice is going. He has queen to g4 check. Yeah, I think we have to take. I think maybe he's starting to panic. Queen to g4 check. Even if we move king to h8, he has no immediate, you know, checkmate, follow-up move. But I think we could just run to the center of the board would be even safer here. And then, I don't know, maybe even king h8, but then this is kind of scary here, and I don't see a way to immediately defend it. So I think king f8, and then if we had to, king goes to this little, yeah. So now what can we do? That would be a blunder. It's guarded by the knight. His rook and knight are still totally undeveloped, and the problem with this is he can't checkmate me with just these two pieces. Like he can deliver this check, but it's not really doing much in reality here. And so I think queen e5 is a good move, you know, applying more pressure on these pawns here. I think bishop c6 wouldn't be bad. It kind of just blocks our, I think centralizing our queen is a way to go here. And then this check, I don't think it does anything. It certainly doesn't deliver checkmate. And then we can maybe get our bishop c6, and then eventually maybe even use our rooks on these open files toward the king. And his king, I mean, he might be kind of cooked here in the long run based off his impulsive rook sacrifice. I mean, you do see a rook sacrifice sometimes, but he just didn't prepare it pretty much at all. Like he doesn't have any pieces on this side of the board. Let's play bishop c6. I don't think we have to start running with the king yet, because bishop c6, it discourages his other developing square of the knight. Really I mean, he could develop like this, but that takes forever and he's going to get, and it also, well, it doesn't threaten this because it's getting guarded by two pieces, but it's pressuring it. There's a difference between pressure and threatening. So right now we're adding pressure to this diagonal, this pawn, and we're opening up the rook here, discouraging further development still of his queen side. And he's going to have a serious problem here, because if he tries to develop this knight, I mean, this pawn is falling. And then his king isn't too safe either. His king is like almost as open as mine is, and mine is, you know, not. I don't think my king is in much danger here. But we'll see what his plan is here. we will see what his plan is here. He hasn't used much time to think about any of his moves, and I think that's like a mistake, I guess, for this ELO. What ELO is this opponent? I guess he might be unrated as well. No, I can't even see. Yeah, check. We move king e7 with tempo. He has to move his queen basically here. And now we're still threatening if he doesn't return to guard it. This might just... Does this just trap his bishop here? Let's see. Rook to h8. And I think his bishop is essentially trapped. He gets some counterplay by opening this file here. But even if the bishop goes back to like f5 here, we could even play rook to g8, might be even more accurate, rook a to g8, and just, you know, accumulate his, it comes with tempo, his queen has to move, and he just resigns. So, I don't know, does this even show their rating? Yeah, he was around 1400. So, I mean, let's analyze, I guess, this game and see what was going on with this game. So 92, very high accuracy with the black pieces, and about 80% accuracy with the white pieces. That's pretty good. So e4, I respond with Sicilian. I think that's where most of my theoretical knowledge lies. And knight f3, d6 is a gateway. Usually you play d4 next here as white in order to open the center. And then you play what's called the open Sicilian here. So I like to play the Najdorf, which is this setup. And then white has a variety of different responses to the Najdorf. They can play something like the English attack. They can play the Sozin attack. Or they could play some like Amsterdam variation like f4. They can play f3, which could transpose the English, but there's like a variety of different responses. Even a4 and a3 are moves that are like very valid and lines you have to prepare for. There's even one called the freak attack, which is, rook to g1, and technically is a book move. But it's called the freak attack. So anyways, that's kind of a sideline for the theory I hope to play in most of my games is the Najdorf, and it's just an immense amount of theory. But bishop c4, I mean, it could transpose the Najdorf if he does a d4 push later, but this is, I think, called the Bowdler attack. And the book move to that is just e6, immediately blunting that diagonal, and then castles. I mean, this is like pretty classic development. You'd see, I guess, if the opponent pushes e5, you generally, this is where you want your pieces, but it's a little bit weaker against c5 because they have more control of I guess just the queen side here. There's going to be a counter attack against your bishop, and you're going to have, the knights come out, and this diagonal is blunted. It's e6 instead of e5, I guess, is the key difference there. So let's go knight f6, and then an e5 push is where, it gets out of the book. And what you do when it gets out of the book is you start thinking with your own brain, right? You take there because you don't want to have the e5 pawn, putting pressure on your position long term. So takes, and then knight to d7. And then, yeah, if he, another line he could play here, which I think is probably even weaker, would be bishop to b5. I've seen this played a lot of times, more even in like a delayed Alapin type game. But what you want to do here is eventually, you wouldn't even have to do it immediately, but you play a6, like eventually compelling him to trade, and then you want to take back with the knight, so his knight is still compelled to either retreat off your side of the board or take this knight and allow you to develop a piece. So he takes immediately. We develop our bishop and c3. So b5 immediately kicks the bishop, and then we play c4, which kicks the bishop again. And ultimately, the plan of that maneuver was to discourage a d4 push, which I think he still should have, gone with the d4 push anyways. B3 is kind of just irrelevant. They say it's a mistake, but I think the reason it's a mistake is it's kind of just irrelevant. It's not helping anything, because if you take, the pawn on c4 is just going to get replaced with the b5 pawn. So we castle, and yeah, b4 was probably another mistake, because first of all, why wouldn't you play it right off the bat instead of playing it in 2 moves? And really, it's just like closing something that you don't want to be closed. You do not want the queen side to be closed when you have this many pieces undeveloped there. So let's see, what is the best move there? And they say just more flexible. Bishop to d6, the computer likes better, and maybe setting up, a AA battery against the white king side here. So that's interesting. I kind of just wanted to keep it on this diagonal, but this would be a more flexible way to attack, because now you're going for the pawn on h2 versus the pin on f2 here. So anyways, we retreat our bishop to b6, which still isn't bad, and then d3. Takes is best, and then bishop takes. Queen to c7. Says it's an inaccuracy, but we're not really concerned that much with inaccuracies here in this position. Bishop to e3, offering a mistake, and now we take and force an isolated pawn, which is another weakness. If you just look at this position, he has a lot of weaknesses long term that you can exploit. So both of these, this is an isolated pawn, this is a backward pawn, which he's going to struggle to push, especially if you reinforce it with like rook c8 or something. His queen side is still underdeveloped, so definitely black has the initiative in this position. And then rook d8, just setting up long-term ideas with this x-ray on the queen is good. And then, kind of an impulsive sacrifice. Rook takes f6, sacrifice the rook, except there's basically no follow-up after you take. So if you don't see a reason that you shouldn't take the material, that's a double negative. But basically, if an opponent sacrifices a piece and you can't see a reason not to take it, you're going to take it and either get taught a lesson or you're just going to win the game, basically, is like some grandmaster said that. I can't remember who, but his philosophy on it. So we take the piece because I can't see a reason not to take it. Queen g4, kind of a pointless check, and you got to decide where to run the king. So king goes to f8 because there's not a lot of, king to h8 I think would have been a mistake, but we run the right way. And then we're not scared of this check because the king has squares to run to here. So yeah, queen to e5, centralizing the queen is the best move, it says. And then e5, protecting the pawn is good. And then we go bishop c6, controlling the d2 square, so the knight is further discouraged from developing. And also, I guess, I mean, it's unlikely that we'll ever face problems here, but it could even open another pathway for the king to retreat here. So check, king moves is forced, queen back to g4, rook to h8, and then our opponent resigns because his bishop is basically trapped. The other rook is coming to g8. Let's see what would have been most accurate if he just retreated to f5. I think something like rook g8, yeah, would be best. And then, like, basically wherever his queen goes, you can just take this bishop, and then a queen trade is like gonna happen relatively soon. Or mate here, I guess, yeah. There's gonna be eventual checkmate. Yeah, I mean, this position is just, he's basically toast after rook to h8. So it was pretty correct to resign, but there wasn't a lot of theory in that game. Let's do one more game so we can try to get more theoretical lines, and this is probably maybe a higher elo player. So let's see. Yeah, 1500 about. So e4, no, game aborted. Let's see. We're playing as white, so we're going to play e4. E6 is the initial move to initiate the French defense. So let's go into it. And I'm going to play, I mean, there's a variety of ways you can respond against the French defense, but I like to do kind of a sideline. You can do knight c3, initiating maybe the winnower. You can do e5, the advanced French, and a lot of players like a Tarrasch attack, like a knight d2, and then that could eventually even go into something wild like an alien gambit. But I'm going to go advanced French here. All right, and then we have c5 here, which is the correct response. And then this is the sideline I like to go into, the advanced Nimzowitsch system is what we have here. And basically the idea of this is actually to, instead of, you know, defending this pawn again with c3, is to sacrifice it, interestingly enough. And we're sacrificing this pawn in order to castle. And the idea behind that is that this is the main pawn we're worried about, the pawn on e5, positionally. I mean, he can play c4, but then we drop our bishop back to e2 with an easy-to-play position, I would say, because we just have more room to attack the king's, the king's side here. Queen, okay, let's see. Queen to b6 is another French move. But I don't think that really changes much of our plan here. We're going to castle and still sacrifice this pawn. All right, good. He takes a pawn, which is correct. And now we can reinforce with rook to e1. We can reinforce this e5 pawn. And the eventual outcome we want to have here is we're going to move our knight around d2 to b3 and eventually win back this pawn, but it's going to be kind of a long-term plan here. So let's reinforce the pawn on e5, and then we're going to bring this knight around eventually d2 to b3. And I like this. The engine says this like line is basically equal, for both sides, but I like this as white because, first of all, it's going to open a variety of traps if black basically castles, like you have a lot of like Greek gift ideas in this line. Like it's pretty common that you'll see, you know, a bishop sacrifice on h7 will work in these sort of positions where all the black pieces are on the queen side here instead of the king side. And also I like this line because it's kind of simple to play as white, I would say, and it's harder to figure out what to do as black. So we're going to go d2 and then b3 here. And we're expecting this knight to come around to f5, I would say, is the more classic French idea. No, it goes around to g6, and I think it's kind of like it's kind of irrelevant on g6, and even could be vulnerable to like an h4, h5 push, because remember we still have two defenders on this. So let's see if we want to continue with knight to b2 or do our h4, h5 push. Let's go h4, h5, why not? And after our knight comes to b2, then our bishop has an open diagonal to which it can be developed eventually. So let's see. Our opponent still has two defenders here and hasn't developed either of their bishops, which is interesting. Usually you see bishop d7 as like kind of an automatic move for this French bishop here in the back, because really without this move he might have some complications with knight b3, and then he thinks he has two defenders. Then we take with both knights and have a discovered check winning the queen here if he's not careful and never plays this move. So might actually see a win happening that way. All right, let's play. I think bishop to d7 might have been a mistake here because we play h5. His knight can't jump back to e7 here. So his knight is going to have to jump to maybe h5. Well, I guess, yeah, I could jump to h5. So let's see. I think we tried this idea here. Tried this idea. Because now we are threatening to win back this pawn. It might not look like it because he has two defenders, but if his bishop is not there on d7, we have an avenue for a revealed check on b5 here, winning the last piece there. And that could be the queen if he's not careful. And his bishop moves to c5, well then his bishop is moved twice. Now we have another tempo to attack the king side here. He does have, well, I guess he could win this pawn here since it's attacked twice, but then we can win back this center pawn. And I think white is doing equally as good. Let's see. Yeah, this is kind of a complicated position, but I think we can go. Let's try to go for this little trap here. knight takes d5. And if knight takes here, we have to take back with our other knight. Maybe it was a mistake to lose this h4 pawn, but we're still gonna basically pretend it wasn't, because now yeah, he cannot take back that knight. So I think and this knight moving to f3 has opened up an avenue for queen g4 to attack his king side, so he might have some problems here, but we'll see. Yeah, that's a good move. Let's see. This is kind of a complicated position here. We can play. We can play queen g4 because after takes we take and defend this pawn. But I don't know who's even better in such a position. We could play bishop to e3, but after takes, bishop e3, he can take the b2 pawn. And then we go rook b1. Let's see. I kind of like bishop b3. Bishop e3 is kind of a very active idea, because if he takes this pawn, I think it's a little bit poisoned after rook b1. And then we have ideas of, you know, just opening up this position. Or we could even play queen g4 after, and this knight has to move. And he might just be getting cooked here if he takes this poison pawn. All right, queen g4, I believe, is a good move here. Because after takes, yeah, this is probably good. Let's see, his knight will have to move. And if we take it, if we're able to take it back and take on g7, that will basically detonate his king side. And if it moves back to, let's see, g6, I think that's the best move. And how are we going to deal with this? He's playing very well so far, I will admit. I'm thinking about even maybe sacrificing here and then opening up to severely discourage him from capturing or from castling on his queen side here. I think that might be an interesting way to do this. He is threatening this pawn here as well. Is something we have to keep in mind, which is a serious threat. Because takes, if we take back there, then he can take the knight. Take, but his rook is hanging, so let's try this. Very complicated position, I would say. And if he takes back his queen, we go rook to b1 and then maybe infiltrate with our rook here. And if he takes with a bishop, I think we have some ideas of revealed attacks on his queen, perhaps, perchance, shall I say, perchance. And if he takes with his knight, we take on g7, attacking his rook. And then he's got serious problems because his knight is also hanging. So I think actually taking on e5 too soon would be a mistake. If he takes, we can just take with a queen and take back with a bishop. And then maybe get a pawn advance going on this side. I don't know. We don't have to calculate everything already. We can wait for our opponent to make their move and then worry about what's happening next later. So we'll see. We are still down a pawn, so we probably want to use tactics and not let this go in an endgame, which I'm trying my best to do right now. Let's see. If we take back with our bishop, he takes back with a queen, then we can go rook b1 and infiltrate. I think I kind of like that avenue more than a queen trade here. And it also guards any ideas of him taking the pawn here. So we got that at least. I think it might be more prudent instead of taking this pawn to just retreat with the queen, honestly. Okay, we're going for it. We're going for it. He is attacking this pawn though, if I move this rook. But then he can drop back because notice how this is skewed. But then we still have that pawn on g7. So I think rook b1 is fine because I think this just leads to this. And then he's losing maybe both rooks per chance. Per chance he's losing both rooks if he takes the pawn and tries to get clever. But, you know, his immediate problem is he's got to move his queen. His queen is under attack. And it looks like we're just getting both of these rooks deep into this position here. And I think we definitely have compensation for the pawn we're going to be down. So let's see where he goes here. He might even have to go back to back home, run back to mama here, and then we take the pawn on b7. I think is what we're eyeing next. I think we have sufficient compensation, but this is a very complicated position, if I would have to say it. And he doesn't have any useful, and we're even threatening to just equalize material here too, but I don't think that's even necessary. I think we just use the pressure we've amounted to try to crush this dude here, because I think after rook b1 and we get the twin towers stack, he has serious problems here. He has serious problems. I think this is the danger of the Nimzowitsch system here. Nimzowitsch must have been a genius to come up with something like this, but you know, engine analysis has given, you know, black some way to equalize, but all right. So now looking at this position just immediately, we have a pen on the queen here that we maybe could exploit, maybe. We also have a diagonal that's opened that's just could lead to a skewer here. So I think maybe rook to c7 would be good, because after this, well, I think rook b1 is still a solid idea. I think doubling the rooks and then rook to c1. I think, yeah, doubling the rooks can't be too bad. Maybe this is more immediately, but then he could go like queen h4, proposing a trade because my queen is undefended here. I think rook b1 is probably slightly more solid in the long run, because we're not eliminating the possibility of just equalizing material here. And our pieces still are pointed at the king's side here. And if we equalize material, let's see. Alright. I think we play rook to c7 and then rook to b7 and we just line up. And eventually we could maybe exploit this pin. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good plan. And he can propose like a rook trade, but I think simplifying it is, well, we'll see. Because we want to trade on our own terms and trade on his back rank, his second rank here, and keep this pin alive. He is proposing to go maybe queen h4 since this piece is now guarded, but I think it's actually a mistake because now rook to b7 comes with serious threats of just, you know, eliminating. We got both pigs on the 7th, pigs on the second rank. And so I think that is enough compensation overall for the one pawn we lost in the middle. I think we're just going to crush him if we go into an endgame now. At this point, if we get both our rooks on the 7th rank here. And this is 20 moves in, so I really like, I guess, the outlook of this, even though we're a pawn down. Alright, queen to e8 is pretty passive, so I think it doesn't really do anything about our plan here to get our rook back there and to maybe eventually equalize material here. Maybe even capture with our bishop and plan to move our queen in and add to the pressure here. And if his bishop moves back and attacks, we just capture and keep this rook here. Capture or maybe even recapture with the bishop in order to get our queen back in the action on this side of the board. But is our queen useful on this side? It might even be useful on this side. I mean, we're still eyeing the king side here. So let's see. There's a lot of ways you can make mistakes. All right, now he's going knight. Is he trying to reactivate his knight somehow? Could maybe go. Does he have? Do we have a? I don't think we have a Greek gift. That would be like a super Greek gift. Let's see. We don't want to make a mistake here and let him defend himself. I think rook takes is simplest, offering up traitor rooks here. Bishop there would be a mistake. Could even reroute our bishop like in reverse here and try to checkmate him on this side. I kind of like that as well, because he can't really, what's he gonna do, move his knight back and then we take. Yeah, I see some prospects in this move. Because our rooks are kind of untouchable by both his pieces. Yeah, the prospect I see in this move, let's see, kind of comes from, could even advance our pawn here and just fully attack his king side, but that's exciting, but does it actually work? Let's see. F4, I mean, F4, F5, and we have 2 attackers. I think this may be good. Let's do it. It's a little bit risky, but I don't see any way he can attack our king. I think we're the ones on the attack now, and I think we got some decent prospects in this. We definitely probably don't want to lose this. So now I think we can go. Let's see. Go there, and now we can take and just simplify here. We can pre-move this. And we have to keep in mind that this is undefended after the push. So we may have to transition into some sort of endgame mentality where these pass pawns are the tool we use in order to checkmate our opponent. So let's see what we got here. We got rook to b8, which he's looking to counterattack. I think it's kind of a I think he's getting confused with who is attacking now, but it's not too easy. I think one method we can use to attack here, well, a pawn getting here would kind of shut down our attack. So let's see. Pawn, I was gonna maybe think about trading for the knight and then advancing here, but an extra pawn on g6 actually kind of foils this push a little bit. We could play queen to, yeah, I kind of like queen to h6, and it kind of forms like a pin on his knight. So after the advance, if he takes, we're just getting in here and checkmating him. So we'll go with that. And then I think if he delivers a check, we're just moving our king up, bomb clouding here. We're going to g2, not bomb clouding. That'd be on e2, but we're going up to f2. Wow, okay, so I don't think this really does much because still, like, both of our pieces are defended here. So let's maybe try f5 break. Let's try the f5. And there's not many good places for his knight to go. Then we're just gonna, our plan here is pretty straightforward. Just shatter his king side here. And then if he captures, we have this just double attack, which he can still get out of here, but actually maybe f5 was a mistake because we're not eyeing on h7 here. So we'll see. Either we lose at this point, or we're going to checkmate him pretty violently. Maybe All right, this has to be calculated. F6 takes, and then he really doesn't, he could just use that pawn to defend himself. This, he takes, check. This, I think he kind of has to take this bishop either way. So then after he takes that bishop, takes, and then we're just winning. Let's see, if he doesn't take the bishop, we're coming in here on his back rank. So I'm fairly certain that that's the right move, but maybe it's just an utter mistake. And then this rook check, I think we're still safe there. Or there. I think we're still safe somehow from the rook check. But we'll see what happens here. G3 might be a way to try to survive it, but then he drops a knight with more problems. I think this is kind of just a game kind of in the spirit of Mikhail Tal or something, just sacrifice. But I mean, at this point, the material's still equal, surprisingly. We'll see. All right, I think this just leads to checkmate here. Back rank. That was a good game. That was a solid game from this opponent. 1500, I'm kind of surprised they were that good. Resign. All right. French Advanced Nimzowitsch System won us a game. That's good. Let's analyze it. Game review has 1 brilliant. That's pretty solid. All right, so we have the French defense normal variation, and then we go to the advanced variation. So the normal way to play the advanced variation here after c5 is you go c3, reinforcing the pawn on d4. And then after an exchange, you kind of go into this, he can go like bishop d7 here, but he goes into this game that generally his themes are like, he can go knight e7, knight c3, and the theme is like generally he's trying to put pressure on this backward pawn here, and you're trying to prevent like the loss of this backward pawn on e4 in order to have a space advantage to attack the king side, to form like a long-term attack on the king side. What we did is kind of like a counterintuitive strategy. You just like straight up sacrifice. You do the knight f3 line, which isn't an immediate sacrifice. Why isn't it? Okay. What? e5, c5, knight f3, please. It isn't an immediate sacrifice, but even if he did take immediately, our plan is to use it as a kind of a positional sacrifice and just put our bishop on d3 and win it back eventually through like a maneuver like knight d2, knight b3, castle, rook e1, or like a lot of thematic moves for this variation. So adding pressure, knight c6, we go bishop d3, just looks like it's blundering a pawn, which it is sacrificing a pawn. And we go castles. Finally, he takes a pawn. Rook e1, reinforcing. Knight e7. Computer like the immediate h4, but we go for the more thematic. Knight d2. h4 is probably actually a mistake here, but, well, I guess it's still okay. Bishop to d7. I should have pushed h5. To be honest, I didn't really even realize that that pawn was hanging. Allowing him to capture it was probably a mistake, but yeah, we take on d4, which was actually a mistake. We should have taken with our knight there, is what the computer likes more. And then just, yeah, used his bishop placement to attack his king side, because when his bishop retreats, it can't defend this at the same time. So yeah, that's something I didn't realize. We went for like a more tactically complicated line, which it still says is equal after bishop c5. Yeah, I didn't even, c3 wasn't even on my radar. I went for like queen g4, or no, bishop e3 first, and then, as I recall, queen g4 came up here soon. So queen g4 and knight g6 was correct. That was like pretty solid defensive resource, but it's still close. And then b4. The computer doesn't really like my sacrifice there, but bishop takes because of h5. What? Oh, just like using the rook there. The fact that he hasn't castled to push me back along this file, but he takes, yeah, which is probably more natural. And then his queen has to retreat. His queen, I guess, should have maintained this pin, but allowing my rooks to get on his 7th rank was probably the thing that decided this game the most. Yeah. Queen back to e8. And it's still like mostly equal here, but it doesn't feel equal. I mean, if I was black, I'd be really worried here. Yeah, that's just an inaccurate move. So what, the bishop takes g6. What tactic did I miss there? I missed the tactic. Bishop takes g6. H takes g6. Bishop g5. And then that forces either this. Yeah, and the event, like, the outcome of that is his rook is forced off this square, which protects the bishop. I see. So that was a good, that would have been a good find there if I'd found that. But anyway, we go with f4, just trying to steamroll black here with the pawns. Rook takes a7, rook takes, rook to b8, queen to h6, then f5 there. E takes f would have been a way to try to hold on with black. But yeah, queen takes just blunders mate in 2 because king has to move back, and queen goes to h8. But hopefully this game demonstrated, you know, the power in some way of the advanced Nimzowitsch system, and some of the key ideas, you know, knight d2, knight b3, sometimes there's an h4 push, and something else that I mentioned in the game is maybe if the player castles too early, for instance, that would maybe come in a position like, let's see, his knight would have to be, yeah, let's say he castles early. I don't know how it would come in a position like this. Let's say we go knight b2, bishop d7, and somehow he is able to like castle here in a position like this, and I don't know. I've seen it in a different line here. Let me look it up. Look it up in my reference manual real quick. I've actually had a game that ended. So it's after e4, e6, d4, d5, e5, and then we go c5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to d3, and then like let's see, c5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop d3, c takes d, and then we go castles, knight g, e7, or this is where knight g, e7 would be the correct move against the advanced French, but bishop c5 is kind of the mistake we have here. For instance, we move rook g1, rook to e1, knight g, e7, and then we see this plan here executed with castles. You can sack this bishop here on h7, bring your knight in, and then wherever the king goes, discovery is going to be basically devastating. You know, if the king goes back to g8, you have queen g5, and you're going to mate him here on h7, or if the rook moves, you're going to mate him eventually. But I've seen the game end here, I think, after knight to f5, I think was the move my opponent played, and then we had just this discovered check, and his king moves back. But eventually, yeah, the point is you're mating him here. It wasn't knight f5. What was the move my opponent played? I think he had played something like, yeah, he played something like irrelevant like this, but I mated him here on g7 was the conclusion of that Greek gift sacrifice. But yeah, so that's an example of what I was mentioning there. Hopefully that was an instructive video on the power of the Nimzowitsch advanced French, and you found it entertaining.